Hey guys, so if you remember in the first two objectives of the advertising management module, we looked at whether advertising was worth it or not. So that was objective one. And then in objective two, we looked at price elasticity and how that might affect your decisions on whether you spend on advertising or try other things such as price discounting. Now for objective three, it's a larger part of the module. It is the 5 main functions of advertising. And for this particular sub-lecture, I'm going to use some local examples to try and illustrate those 5 functions. Some of these examples have been provided by some of my students. So if you look at the slide, we have those 5 main functions of inform, persuade, remind, add value, and assist. So an easy way to remember this for your test or in the real world when you sort of try to justify advertising and some of the functions that it may serve a business as an investment is the acronym IPRAA: inform, persuade, remind, add value, and assist. So for the first part of the acronym, inform, I've got 2 examples here. One is Spark. That's the telecommunications company in New Zealand. And so what you'll see with a lot of their advertising is that it's informing people about the various packages that they have in terms of their plans, their pricing, and the features of those packages. So this is a very, I guess, functional approach to advertising, and the excuse me, the reason for that is to just let people know what is different about your particular product or service compared to competitors, so they know what they're getting into when they start to do business with you. Another example is a more boutique company, so that's Frank Body Scrub, and so they're a company that uses used coffee grounds and turns that into a body exfoliation product. So very sustainable business sort of positioning there, and they don't have a massive budget like Spark does, and so when they advertise, they can't be spending millions of dollars, but the function of their advertising is very similar, and that is to inform people of their product. So in this case, they use Instagram to show people the before and the after of their product use. And it could also be to inform about the process by which they create their product using, existing sort of waste material to make a very eco-friendly product. The second function is persuade. So within that, you're trying to use advertising to convince people why they should do business with your company. Another example I use is a boutique t-shirt fashion, urban sort of fashion company, Off-White. So you'll note that once again, because they don't have massive budgets, they won't use sort of these mainstream advertising. However, they're still trying to persuade people of their brand image, that they're hip, they're urban, they're cool, and so they don't really focus too much on the product features, because the product features may be quite similar to any other sort of fashion label. Instead, they're trying to persuade people about the brand image surrounding that Off-White brand, is that they're kind of edgy and cool and urban. And so they'll use influencers, they may use fashion shows, they'll have a lot of video content, and all of that is to persuade people to consider that brand when they want something slightly different, a little bit sort of underground. Another example is Sanitarium. So this is a food producing company, typically making cereals and other sort of breakfast products. So Weet-Bix is their flagship product, and the advertising surrounding Weet-Bix will once again be to persuade people that it's a healthy choice for breakfast, and they do this through a variety of means. One is the health star rating, another is to sponsor the All Blacks because they're an example of healthy athletes, and so through that sort of advertising campaigning, they will be able to persuade people that they are also a healthy brand. The third function of advertising under the IPRAA acronym, inform, persuade, and now remind. So remind plays a big part in people's purchase decision habits, and when a product is in your top of mind or your consideration set, then you're more likely to default to that product, because what's familiar is less risky, and therefore people often buy because of something that seems familiar. And advertising serves the function of reminding people that as a product or a brand that you're always there. So you're keeping that top of mind awareness. So it reminds a big function of advertising. So if we go back to Spark, which is that telecommunications example, they're always constantly advertising to remind people that they're a viable choice among the sea of competitors. Well, in this case, in New Zealand, we only really have three major telcos. So we've got 2 Degrees, Vodafone, and Spark. And so they're always trying to maintain the same level of advertising in order to remind people that they're still relevant, they're still there, they still have various plans. If they have a certain brand image, they're trying to remind people that their brand image is slightly different from the existing competitors. So reminding is something that advertising constantly does. Because even after you've informed people of your various products, or maybe you've persuaded them of some sort of brand image, or you've persuaded them on some sort of unique selling proposition, you still need to remind them. And so remind plays a very big role in terms of one of the most important functions of advertising. With Spark, they also, if they set up your broadband at home, the default screen will be set to a Spark homepage until you change it to Google or something more useful. But the point of that, once again, is trying to remind them of the service that they're providing to their customers. Sanitarium, using that example again, once again, when you see ads from Sanitarium about Weet-Bix kids or Kiwi kids, it's reminding people of their connection to New Zealand, their health benefits, because often the ads show that these kids are leading very active lives. And so it's reminding people of the previous thing they did, which was to persuade you that their brand is a healthy one. The fourth function of advertising is to add value. So if you recall one of the first lectures within this module, when we asked whether advertising was worth it or not, I gave you the example of how some people could view advertising as an expense and others could see it as an investment. And if you view advertising as an investment, then it should be adding value to the business somehow. Now, charging a price premium is a good function of advertising. So the example I have here is Icebreaker, which is a New Zealand merino clothing brand manufacturer, and so they're a very successful international brand now, available all over the world, and they command a price premium because of the various advertising they've done throughout the years to really build up that brand image. So what Icebreaker has been able to do is to charge a lot for what is essentially a product based on a commodity, which is merino wool. And early in the days of Icebreaker, it could have gone either way. If they didn't build a brand image and secure the supply chain to the extent that they did, then their brand may not have made it to the success that it is today. And in the next function, I'll talk about another function of advertising that would help you sort of command that price premium. But Icebreaker is a good example of how advertising done correctly can really get you to charge a lot more for each unit of your product sold, and therefore it increases the revenue that is generated, even though advertising is still an expense. The revenue it generates is above and beyond the expense that it cost. Another example, going back to Frank Body Scrub. So once again, that's adding value, right? Because if you think about it, the majority of their product is used coffee grounds, right, which is almost worthless. However, with good advertising and not spending millions, but just positioning in the right way, communicating to the right people, they're able to charge now for this product that would have been thrown away. So that's a really good example of how advertising can add value to a product. The final function of advertising is to assist. So this is a bit more of a tricky function because it's not as obvious. It's not the other, the previous examples of the functions were very obvious in that if you advertise, you're obviously informing people of something, you're trying to persuade them of something, maybe you're reminding them, and then if you do things correctly, you could charge a little bit more. Assist kind of works in a roundabout fashion, in that advertising can assist the company achieve other objectives. So one example I have here is Burger Fuel. So a while back, maybe a decade or so ago, Burger Fuel listed as a public company and was selling shares. And so some of the advertising back in those days was nothing to do with selling the burger. It was actually to inform people that they were selling shares, and this assisted the company into achieving its other goals, which was to gather enough investment interest so that they could really globalize their brand. Another example, to go back to Icebreaker. So as I mentioned before, during the early stages of the brand, the price of merino wool could have gone either way because it is a commodity. It could have been sold quite cheap to the lowest bidder, essentially. But what Jeremy, the owner of Icebreaker, was able to do very strategically was to convince all the suppliers not to undercut each other. And through this, he was able to build the international brand and value of merino wool within his brand of Icebreaker, right? And so this is something that manufacturers will do sometimes, is that they'll go to the retailer or perhaps their suppliers, and they'll say, look, I'm going to invest in advertising to make this product worth more in a couple of years' time. Now, if you go along with the plan and allow me to invest in this advertising by giving me some exclusive rights, then it'll end up being better for the entire stakeholder network. And so advertising there will assist not only Jeremy's company, Icebreaker in that case, but it works for other manufacturers too. So on a private consulting project that I did with Aquaticus, which is an organic fish fertilizer brand, that brand was made from fish waste from the seafood industry. And so, you know, this is once again using a waste product that could be easily dumped or chucked away. But Bruce, the owner of that company, convinced the suppliers, which are fishing companies, not to undersell the product and to just give them some exclusive rights to be the only person to be able to create an organic fish fertilizer, so that then he could sell it on to King's Plant Barn and Palmer's, Mitre 10, etc. But the advertising he was going to invest in building his brand would increase the worth of the product for everyone. And so advertising in that sense wasn't really directed at trying to convince the end consumer to use the product, although that could play a role. But another function was to assist the brand into establishing a platform for which the business ecosystem could thrive.